segment 5.4 relating to maintaining secrecy. So again, when we look at the three components of trade secrets, we have information that is providing some competitive advantage or economic value to the company. And the third component of that is that it is being maintained secret. So courts will grant parties considerable latitude and actually determine whether or not what an appropriate level of security actually is. So this reasonable test would, when you look at all the different factors that courts consider, it's very much a balancing test. So it's not just simply have they done X, Y, and Z. It's, all right, what is the value of X? What's the value of Y? What's the value of C? And we're balancing that against everything they did and everything that they didn't do and should have. And so it's this balance test that's the aggregation of all these factors that are being considered to determine whether or not there is a sufficient amount of secrecy, a sufficient amount of security to keep it actually secret. So some of the factors that are considered here, one, and you may be thinking, well, a lot of these factors seem like they're popping up over and over again. The value of the information, we've already discussed that with respect to information and also with respect to the economic value itself. But we'll talk about it in a different context here. Here is all about whether or not you're taking steps to preserve and to keep secret that which is of value, namely the information. So for example, the more valuable the information you're protecting, you would also expect the more security is being kept to keep it more secret. Whereas if the information really isn't that valuable, you would not expect the same level of security being applied to it. As far as the need to disclose this information, you would look at whether or not, for example, if a company is dependent upon a third-party supplier in order to provide with parts by which it can, assemble the device, you would look at, is it actually dependent upon a third-party provider, and is there a need to disclose information to that third-party provider? Namely, let's say that there is exact specification of material in a specific manner so that it would fit into the secret sauce puzzle that they are assembling. If you did you disclose everything relating to the secret sauce puzzle, or did you disclose just that information that third-party supplier needed in order to do what it is that you needed to do? As far as limits on disclosure, they would look at what was disclosed and to the extent it was disclosed. Did you disclose everything? Did you only disclose a part of everything? And did that also mirror the amount of what was actually necessary to be conveyed? So if you're talking about an employee, did you disclose everything to the employee, or did you just disclose that which was necessary for the employee to function within the requirements that they provide? As far as steps taken to preserve confidentiality, they would look at whether or not an NDA has been signed, whether or not you have a system of actually having NDAs signed, whether or not to what extent the confidential requirements of an NDA would prevent employees, for example, from disclosing that which they are aware of. As far as physical limitations, they would look actually at fences, unlocked doors, whether there are passwords on the doors, whether there are key fobs, how easy it would be to replicate this information from the public's point of view. As far as keeping track of copies of the information, they would look at records of access. So when you look at, for example, evidence law and how evidence is put forth before courts, often there is a trail as far as where that evidence went and who actually was handling the evidence before it actually ends up in court. And with trade secrets, it's almost a similar type mentality here, where we want a string as far as recording access to it. Could anybody go in and actually access this information or see the secret sauce or find out? Or did you actually separate it out so that not one person actually holds all information for the recipe? So there's some folklore relating to a lot of these highly prized trade secret type information, whether it's Cook's secret recipe or Mrs. Field's secret recipe. And some say, well, whether or not this is true, I do not know, but it emphasizes the point, and that is simply, rather than having one individual have the master recipe of everything that occurs, they split it up between a few individuals. So each person, in order to create the master recipe, it's split up between multiple individuals, and each of those only have part of the recipe that they use, and they control that specific part. They put in their ingredients or the factors, and that actually helps create the end product. Now, from a logistics point of view, I have a hard time believing that, because in our modern society where everything is moving so fast and we focus on efficiency, I can't help but think they will still maintain secrecy, but allocate one person or one set of individuals to actually go ahead and implement that recipe. But in short, there's a record of access, that if you have the recipe in a centralized location, it would tag who saw it, when they saw it, how long they saw it, things of that nature. As far as informing employees of restriction on the information, yes, they may have signed an NDA, but you also need a systematic pattern of informing the employees that this is information that is being kept private, that you are not allowed to disseminate in any manner whatsoever. So they would look at the pattern of really looking at to what extent you actually took steps to keep it private. So the biggest thing to take away as far as all these factors is that not one factor alone is the most important factor, but they will look in aggregate at the balance of all these different factors to determine, namely at the end of the day, whether or not you took reasonable steps and what the value of that economic value is to the trade secret and to the company, which proportionally, as the value of that goes up, you would expect a proportionally increased amount of secrecy and factors that must be satisfied in order to make sure that that level of security is actually found reasonable.